Welcome to the Rock and Roll Show podcast. We are here to share the magic of experiencing live music together with strangers and with friends, and to get to know our guests a little bit better through their concert experiences. I'm your host, Alex Gadd, and I do this because, hey, I love talking about music with people. Finding out what bands someone likes, what shows they've been to, allows us to get to know and understand one another a little bit better. And hey, I just love swapping stories about the shows that we've seen over the years. Today, I'm happy to introduce Soph Stafford to the podcast. Soph is our first international guest on the show. She hails from Australia. She has a very interesting history of seeing live music, which we're going to get right into. So, Soph, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'd like to start just by finding out where you got your interest in music. Was music something that was always around? How did you get into music in the first place?
I was really lucky actually. So both my parents love music and my grandmother, who I was really close with, also loved music, and they all loved different kinds of music. So I was exposed to, I guess, a melting pot of different sounds from a really young age. Probably my earliest sounds coming from the stereo in the lounge room at home, and a little bit of maybe healthy competition between mum and dad about what was going to get played. My dad loves rock and roll, blues. He's 8 years older than my mum, so almost a different generation musically. And then my mum loves really eclectic stuff. So she loves everything from Dylan and Woody Guthrie to very classic country music to gospel to Elvis to all kinds of different things. And my nan really loved the crooners. So I really got a nice exposure to music from a very young age.
Yeah, my exposure started with just being in the car with my parents and being subjected to whatever they listened to. And so I very similarly, my mom was into rock and roll, my dad was into folk music and more the Americana type of music. I didn't get a lot of crooners. You mentioned a bunch of artists there, none of whom are Australian, but for someone who's American and doesn't know a ton about the Australian music scene, especially back in the 70s and 80s, what Australian music was the first to catch your ear or catch your fancy?
Uh, We actually didn't listen to heaps of Aussie music at home. There was an album that I think every 70s and 80s parent owned, which was a collection of Banjo Patterson, who's a very iconic Aussie poet, his songs or his poetry put to music. And I think every household had that. But we didn't listen to a lot of Aussie music at home apart from Slim Dusty. So Slim Dusty was kind of, I guess, what we would deem to be our country superstar. So he was a country pioneer,
Hmm.
probably on par with maybe like a Hank Snow. He was a storyteller. He sang songs for truckers and farmers and kind of told the Aussie bush tales and things like that. So my mum liked him a little bit, but he never quite fell on my ears right. So even from a small child, I would hear his music and kind of cringe a little bit.
That may have been too old fashioned for you by the
Yeah,
time you were getting into
yeah,
music.
yeah.
Did you have a first favorite band?
I think I did. So I remember really distinctly listening to a lot of Billy Joel as a kid. Mum used to blast Billy Joel. And so I think that was probably the first sound that I remember really catching my ears. And also Fleetwood Mac was getting played a lot on the radio, and that was sort of the car sound. So the at home band that I heard first was probably Billy Joel. And then yeah, in the car it was very much Fleetwood Mac.
As an American, I'm always, and we talked about this when we first met, I'm very conscious not to assume that American culture is the dominant culture in other Western countries. But it sounds like, at least for popular music, it really was down when you were a child.
Yeah, and look, there's a very thriving Aussie music scene. There's really iconic bands that we have that still tour today that people really, really love. They've just never really appealed to me. So I think my ear has certainly caught the American sound more than maybe Aussie music. And probably I also love a little bit of the British invasion as well. So, I mean, everyone loves the Beatles.
Right. Me too. I almost wore a Beatles shirt today, but I don't know how you feel about the British flag. So,
I mean, I had to
uh,
take a little minute and decide what t-shirt I was going to wear today as well because I collect rock t-shirts. So I went with Willie Nelson.
can't go wrong. Can't go wrong. And he's playing this summer all across America.
Yeah,
Okay, so let's get into your first show. Do you remember the first concert you went to?
absolutely. So the first concert I went to was New Kids on the Block. I love a
Okay,
boy band. So
right
they
on.
were probably my first active musical rebellion, I would say, which sounds really lame when you think about them as a boy band. But in our household, they were obviously a sound that my parents were hearing. So when I was maybe 7, 8, 9, 10, I started listening to popular radio and watching MTV and things like that. And once I saw boy bands, I instantly fell in love. And so New Kids on the Block were the first concert. I remember so clearly the tickets went on sale, and obviously before the internet, you had to go to a ticket booth and buy the tickets. And I heard on the radio that the concert had sold out and my parents hadn't given me tickets. And I think it's the first really spectacular tantrum I threw as a child. Like, my life is over. I'm not going to see New Kids on the Block. This is awful. The sky is falling. And my parents just let it roll. And I went on for a long time. And then eventually one of them went, "We got me tickets." And so I felt excited and foolish all at once.
Yeah, that's a parent thing to do for sure.
Yeah.
Now, can you give me a time frame for that?
Yeah, it would have been early 90s, late 80s, early
Sure.
90s
Yeah.
when they hit. Uh,
Yeah.
I mean, down here, shows go on sale a good 12 months before the artist actually tours. So I remember going to the show and I'd almost moved out of my New Kids on the Block phase by the time I got there. I was still really excited to go to the show. And it was this heady mix of girls my age and a little bit older and dads who were reluctantly attending. So I remember my dad dozing off during the show. I remember just thinking it was amazing.
So that is very interesting that New Kids on the Block, for almost any of their fans, appealed to a certain age person and then they grow out of it, but then they'd come back to it later as
Oh, yeah.
the ultimate nostalgia music. So I'll ask you, do you now find a certain joy in listening to New Kids on the Block?
So I'm going to be totally honest, even though they're my first love boy band, they're probably not my favorite boy band anymore, but I definitely do go and revisit that genre. I've seen the Backstreet Boys maybe 3 or 4 times. And yeah, I love it.
And did that also include NSYNC, or were you not into
No,
NSYNC?
not an NSYNC fan.
Did that expand to other pop music? Did that expand to Britney and Christina and the first real wave of millennium era pop princesses?
I think I was already into the pop music by the time those guys hit.
Yeah,
They're a similar age group to me, so I was already maybe well into pop and then well out of pop by the time they
got it.
hit. Because in the in the intervening time between Britney and Christina and New Kids on the Block, there was Nirvana, right? And that changed the world a little bit. And
Sure did.
so for me, I went through a rebellion where I was like, ugh, pop music.
Right.
Ugh. Now I've come full circle. It wasn't cool to like pop music. So yeah, I liked Nirvana, Smashing Pumpkins, and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, hearing the pop music then it really changed that experience for me. Whereas now I can really appreciate pop music and I love it.
Sure. Sure. So you went to see New Kids on the Block as a young kid,
Yeah.
not with by yourself. I assume your parents had to take you to that
Yeah,
show.
my dad took me. I
Yeah,
think he
as
drew
you
the
said,
short straw.
right,
Yeah.
sleeping through it.
Yeah.
Did you see other shows during your high school years?
No. So, I
No.
mean, living in Australia, right? We don't get a lot of big acts come down here. And when they
Yeah.
do come down, the concerts sell out really quickly and the tickets are usually really expensive. And so they're not super accessible to fans. And so, no, I went on a concert drought for most of my teenage years
Wow.
and then once I started earning my own money and I could channel that in a way that made me happy, concerts were back on the agenda.
Right on. So did that take you around Australia pursuing concerts, or did you actually have to leave Australia? I know Australians are the first people to get on a plane and travel. So I know that you've since done a lot of traveling to chase music. Did that start when you were earning your own money right away, or did you have to build up?
I had to build up to that. So I had my kids really young. So I was a teenage mum. So that's where my focus was for a little minute there. It never moved away from music, but it's just not live music because when you've got small kids, obviously it's not super accessible. But once they were old enough to be babysat, friends and I would go and see bands in Australia. So, Ben Harper and Jack Johnson and people like that would come down on tour and we could get their tickets, and Pearl Jam obviously tour a lot, and so we could go and see them. Really what got me started on understanding that I had to go somewhere else to see the bands I love to see was back in 2010, 2011. A friend of mine won a trip to the American Music Award. And so we got to go we flew over to LA. We got to go in a limo, walk the red carpet, and we what we didn't actually know was we'd be sitting front row at the American Music Awards. And so we took our seats, and there we are, front row. And the first thing that happened is Lionel Richie walked past and came and introduced himself. And we were just starstruck and excited. And it was an amazing experience. We got to go backstage and into people's dressing rooms and all kinds of cool stuff. And I realized this is where the fun is. I've got to come here to do this cool stuff. And it took off from there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what would the next concert you saw after New Kids be?
Oh, do you know, I probably think maybe Crowded House, which are an Aussie slash Kiwi band, but I know that they're
Sure.
big over in the States as well. So I think
Yeah.
probably would have been the next one, or maybe Ben Harper, maybe Jack Johnson. There was a drought for a minute.
All right. Did you ever play a musical instrument?
I did, but not well.
Okay. Was that a school thing?
Yeah, it was a school thing. And I had a friend who was in a really musical family, but they loved piano, accordion, and harp, and all these kind of not really grungy music things. So
Sure.
we used to noodle around, but yeah, I showed no affinity at all for musical instruments. I can't sing. I have no natural sense of rhythm whatsoever. I just no discernible talent music at all, but I
But
love.
you have a great ear for
I
what you
think so.
love. Good. So let's get into traveling for music. Australia to the States is usually LA, correct? That's your easiest flight. What other countries have you flown to see concerts?
Just the States. Because
Just the States.
Europe is really cost prohibitive for us. The fares are more expensive, the accommodation's more expensive. So, really, for us, the States is where we head. And
Hmm.
we like American artists, so it just makes sense to come to you.
Fair enough. Do you remember the first trip to see a concert or see concerts? Because I assume you packed in more than one while you were here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, there's been a few, and usually they end up back to back. So, we'll get home and I'll go, I found this great show, hun. And that's how it all starts. Yeah.
Right.
The first show that we saw deliberately over there was the Stones in Anaheim, which was really cool. We got to take my mum, who's a massive Stones fan, so that was a pretty unreal experience.
Do you remember what year that was?
That was probably 2013, I think, 2012,
Okay.
2013. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Good.
yeah. And that was
And so
incredible.
that was one shot in Anaheim.
Yeah, one shot. And
Okay.
then the music travel really started. I think
All right.
as soon as we visited Nashville and we realized how accessible music was, that started a whole chain of events. So the first big show that we saw in Nashville was a tribute to Mel Haggard.
Hmm.
And Mel died on, I think, his 79th birthday. And
Hmm.
then on his 80th birthday, they put on this amazing event. in Nashville, and it had so many fantastic artists. And we got really cheap seats. I think they were like 45 US dollars each. And for us, we'd be paying 300 Aussie dollars here for something like that. So it was an amazing night. It was hours of music with all these incredible artists just paying tribute to Mel. And once we did that once, I started seeking out those sort of shows. And that's where that, hey, I found this cool thing. What do you reckon? And my
Right.
husband is just as irresponsible as I am. So we just flights and away we go.
That's excellent. How many shows in the States have you seen roundabout? I don't need an exact number, but generally,
I think we're probably over 50. I think.
nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what cities have you gone to see shows in the States?
We've seen shows in Nashville, Louisville, Chicago, LA,
Phoenix. I
Phoenix.
know you've
Yeah.
seen a show in Phoenix.
Seen a
Have you
few.
ever been to New York?
Yeah. So we've never seen a show in New York, which is funny.
Okay.
My friend and I, again, won a holiday to New York in 2017, and we were staying right near Times Square, and Jerry Lee Lewis was supposed to be playing at BB King's Blues Club. So we went and bought tickets for that. And then he cancelled on the day, which was a bit sad. But we came close to seeing someone cool in New York, but didn't quite
Yeah.
make that. But
Or that club is closed now, which is
I
terrible.
know, I know, it's a
Terrible.
shame. It was a cute little venue. Yeah,
Great club.
yeah.
Great club. So we got to get you to New York. We have to get you to go to Madison Square Garden to see a show. That's the ultimate.
We did try to get Billy Joel tickets, but you know, they were a little
I
out of
understand
our price range. Yeah,
they're a little pricey,
yeah,
along with an airfare
yeah,
thrown in and a
exactly.
hotel.
Yeah.
I can imagine. What band have you seen the most often?
Willie Nelson. It all
Very good.
started with that Mel Haggard show. I didn't
Okay.
actually know I liked Willie Nelson. My mum loves Willie Nelson. And so he was just kind of a soundtrack to my younger years, but I didn't actually understand that I liked him until I
Hmm.
saw him walk out on stage. And from that first strum and that first note that he sang, I just got so emotional. I started crying. And that's the beautiful thing about going to live music, right? It hits
Hmm.
different. And
Yeah.
I realized I loved him and needed to see a show of his. And that's often now where it comes to, hey, huh, I've got these great tickets. And so we've been really, really lucky. We got to go and see Willie's 86th birthday celebration in Nashville. And I said,
Hmm.
great. Okay, now I've seen Willie. I've seen him do a show. I've seen him do a big arena thing. That's cool. I've done that. Unless we got tickets to maybe his Outlaw Music Festival or something. And then, funnily enough, I managed to get tickets for Outlaw Music Festival in Charlotte. And away we went again.
So
And
you've been to
then,
Charlotte too, North
yeah,
Carolina on your
yeah,
list.
Charlotte.
Okay, good.
And then I got tickets again. Whoops, in Cincinnati. So we had to go again.
Those shows are great. That's what I want to see this year is the Outlaw Music
They're
Festival.
so fun. The atmosphere
Yeah.
is awesome. They're usually
Yeah.
in outdoor arenas and yeah, they're
Right.
really cool.
Yeah. Do you ever see live music in what part of Australia do you live in
We're in
without getting too
Melbourne, so we're
specific?
down south.
Melbourne. Okay.
Yeah.
So do they have a good music club scene in town of Melbourne? No.
Look, live music has really, really struggled post pandemic in Australia. Um,
Hmm.
Venues have closed. I mean, we were, as a country, we were sort of shut down for 2 years. So
Hmm.
there was no going in or out. Our borders were closed and we couldn't gather in large groups for a really long time. So the live music scene was obviously deeply impacted by that. And so we're only just now starting to see shows have a bit of life about them again. I remember the first show that we saw post lockdown. We drove to a little regional country town and went to a little tiny pub and saw this great old school blues musician called C.W. Stone King. He's an Aussie guy from Perth and he's amazing. He's absolutely incredible. And so I've never been more grateful to see live music than being on such a long drought and then being able to see it again. So there is an Aussie music pub scene and little clubs, but it's not what it used to be.
That's too bad. And I know that a lot of the biggest bands in the US and Great Britain would go down to Australia at the end of a tour and that would be the finale. And you mentioned Pearl Jam. Springsteen used to go down to Australia and spend the whole winter down there. And he seemed to have a really big following down there. The Foo Fighters were just down there, if I'm not mistaken. So hopefully that all starts to
Yeah.
come back around and we get more bands down there. Do you have any plans to come back to the States to see a show this year?
I mean, we just got home in April, but I do have my eye on a few events in August. So just depend if we can build the bank balance up quickly enough to book it.
Sure.
But yeah, there's an amazing show that's going on in LA. I think it's right at the end of August. And it's a lot of the really big Motown artists. So Diana Ross and Lionel Richie and Smokey Robinson, which I would just
Wow.
love to see. And then Reverend Al Green and um, Nile Rodgers and Chic. So a pretty amazing ensemble show, which I would really, really love to be at. So I'm
Okay.
sending positive vibes out there to manifest
Yeah,
going to
let's
that.
put it out there. Where is that show going to be?
So I think it's at SoFi Stadium.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
That's a
so it'll
big.
be a big one. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
All right. And what were you doing in April in the States?
So funnily enough, I found tickets to something that was really cool and really unusual. As I said, we've been to a few Willie Nelson shows. Last year, we got to go to his 90th at the Hollywood Bowl, which was amazing. That was across 2 nights. And I said, okay, I've had my fill of Willie Nelson now. We can move on. Unless I get tickets to the Luck Reunion, which is the music festival that he throws at his ranch in Austin,
Right.
Texas.
Right.
And we got tickets. It's super small. There's only 2,000 tickets every year. It's very intimate little festival that he hosts on his red in a little Western town movie set that was built for the Red-Headed Stranger movie. And it's very cool and very, very hard to get tickets for. And we got tickets. So unfortunately, that meant we had to book flights and come over to the States. And so we started there and then we moved to Phoenix because in a perfect chain of events, we managed to get tickets to see Springsteen, Madonna, and Toto all in a 4-day window. So,
What a lineup. It's a festival all of your own making.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And each so, so different, but so, so
Yeah.
fabulous.
Yeah, that Springsteen show was a really good one on his tour. Is there an artist out there that you haven't seen that you most want to see that you
Yeah,
haven't
so
seen?
I have a couple of interesting bucket lists. So my first bucket list is to see every living artist who performed a James Bond theme song. So I've been gently ticking that list off. So I've seen Tom Jones and I've seen Gladys Knight a couple of times and
Duran Duran?
have not seen Duran Duran. So they're on there. They're definitely on that list. And the second list that I've got going concurrently, just to cover all my bases, is to try and see every artist who performed in the We Are the World. So I ticked a couple off this last trip, which was really cool.
Sure.
Yeah.
And you met Lionel Richie, which is almost as good as seeing him perform, is just
And
meeting him.
Quincy Jones.
Yeah.
Quincy Jones was at the American Music Awards, so I got to meet him as well.
Who is the most impressive musician that you've ever met? Those are two pretty impressive ones.
Yeah, they are, right? The most impressive musician.
Or favorite musician
Favorite. I've
that
met
you've
so
met.
many. I wouldn't say they're the most impressive, but I got to meet the Backstreet Boys. I won a radio competition to go to their sound check, which was really fun.
You really are lucky with the radio competitions.
I am a semi professional, I think you guys call them sweeps enterer. And so that has actually been an amazing way to gain access to live music. So I won a trip to go to Sydney to meet Crowded House when they first got back together.
Hmm.
And that was embarrassing because I'm actually terribly uncool when I meet famous people. And I've met lots of famous people and now, and I'm still not any better than what I was when I first started meeting famous people. But basically, I met all the band and then I looked around and Neil Finn, the lead singer, was gone and I didn't get to meet him. And so I said to the bass player, he didn't sign my CD. I didn't get to meet him. And he goes, no worries, come with me. So he took me into their dressing room. And I have this great photo of me looking like a sea hag. Just, I can't believe I'm meeting Neil Finn. And my sister was with me at the time. And I came out and she goes, you just got to meet one of your music idols. What did you say? And I said, hmm. And then I had a flashback. What I actually said to him was, hi, Neil, could you please sign my CD cover? I bought a new pen. The newsagent said it wouldn't smudge. And that was all I said to him. That was it. So years later, I got to redo it all over again. I happened to be on a flight that Neil was on. And so he had boarded the flight in Auckland in New Zealand. And I had the nearly 12-hour flight to think about all the good things I could say to him if I could bump into him as we were disembarking. And I did bump into him because, I chased him through the airport to LAX. We managed to get next to him, the customs and immigration line. And I went, excuse me, Neil, I really love your music. It's amazing. And he went, thanks.
Yeah, I've also met a number of musicians, famous musicians, and after trying to do something meaningful, I learned that it's better just to say, "Hey, thanks for being the soundtrack to my life," or "Thanks for all your great music," and not expecting anything because I am not going to say anything they haven't heard before, nor do they care. I'm sure they appreciate it, but at the same time, they're so jaded to it that it's
Yeah.
hard to make an impression. So saying thank you is you have to be happy with that and know you did your best. And once in a weird blue moon, they'll talk to you. You can't count. And so you just do it because you're doing the right thing. Saying thank you is never a bad.
Being able to say thank you is probably what I aim for, but often that's not what comes out of my mouth. So we paid for a meet and greet to meet Def Leppard because they're one of my husband's favorite bands. So we went and had the photo and everything with the band, and the band was sort of split in two. So my husband was talking to these guys and I was talking to these guys, and Joe Elliott, the lead singer, said to me, well, anyway, enjoy the show tonight. And I, instead of saying thanks, I went, you know what?
Oh,
I've never used finger guns in my life. I don't know where that came from.
did he laugh
And
when
he
you
kind
did
of
that
went,
at least?
hey, yeah, cool.
Yeah, okay. So you've seen
Seen
Def
Def Leppard
Leppard.
a couple of times, met Def Leppard, caught a guitar pick at a
Wow.
Def Leppard show. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to see them this summer. They're one of my top bands that I've never seen that
Yeah,
I really want to
it's
see.
so
So good. And the soundtrack to
yeah.
my high school. Their two big records came out when I was in high school and when I was in college. So a huge, huge band for me. And I've never seen them. And they're playing in New York this year, and I'm
Are you going
definitely
to a show where
making a point
Heart
to go see them.
is playing with them?
I believe they are, and Anne just canceled her whole
Oh no.
European tour
Oh,
today. She's having a sudden medical procedure, but all of her summer, all of the Heart summer shows should still be there. They're actually supposed to, I believe they're playing with, yeah, Def Leppard, Journey, Heart, and Steve Miller Band are all playing at the same show. So I'm going to try to get tickets for that. That's about a month after a Foo Fighters show that I really want to go to, where the Pretenders are opening up and Wolfgang Van
amazing.
Halen. So it's going to be a great summer of big rock and roll
Yeah,
shows
see,
for
for
me.
us, that involves a flight. We have to fly somewhere to
Yeah,
see
I
that.
understood. Although you could have
Could
seen
have
Foo
seen Foo
Fighters, right?
Fighters,
Except,
have seen Foo Fighters. Haven't seen Foo Fighters in Melbourne, interestingly. Foo Fighters are probably not one of my favorite
interestingly.
bands, so I wouldn't go out of my way to
Hmm.
see them, but we saw them headline the Bourbon and Beyond Festival in Kentucky. But where we really saw
Hmm.
them, which was really amazing, is we managed to get tickets to the Chris Cornell tribute show in LA, which was
Wow.
incredible. So that was absolutely amazing. So that was just hours and hours and hours of amazing music. It wasn't recorded, it wasn't televised. It was just for the people
Right.
in the room, and it was like going to an Irish wake. It was just an incredible experience, and, yeah, that was another one of those ones where, "Hey, we won't fly to the States this year unless," and you know, I accidentally got tickets because I was up at 3 AM, on multiple devices and managed to get tickets. Yeah,
Oops.
yeah,
So you've seen a number of really unique and amazing shows. Do you have one show that stands out above all the others as your
yeah,
favorite show?
absolutely. Mm, when Kenny Rogers was doing his farewell tour, I managed to get tickets to see the All In for the Gambler show in Nashville. And again, we had to book flight. And I found out the day before the show that Kenny was getting a star dedicated to him on the Walk of Fame in Nashville. And so
Right.
me and a couple of other grandmas who love Kenny Rogers were lined up at 9 AM to make sure we could see him get his star on the Walk of Fame. And I spent 5 hours in the sun waiting to see Kenny get his star, and it was very cool. He came in on his golf cart and did all that. And as we were leaving that, a guy started talking to us, and I recognized him. He's the owner of the Johnny Cash Museum in Nashville and the Klein Museum. And I'd met him the year before because I was at opening day for the Patsy Cline Museum. And he said to us, "Do you want to come through the Cash Museum and have a look around?" And we said, "Yeah, that'd be great." So we were wandering the museum, and he came up to us and said, "Hey, where are your tickets for tonight's show?" And I said, "Oh, nosebleed." And he said, "Would you like to join us in our corporate box?" And again, I started crying because how amazing. So we got to go with this amazingly generous act. We got to go and sit in this corporate box that kind of straddled the front of the stage and backstage. So we got to watch the whole show, which was amazing. The Judds played, Chris Stapleton played. Obviously, Dolly finished the show with Kenny, and no one knew Kenny was quite ill at the time. And after they'd finished singing Islands in the Stream together, they walked backstage and I could see them just sharing a hug together. And I have to think that that was probably the last time that they had that backstage moment together because he passed away not that
Mm.
long after that. So that was a
Wow.
really incredible moment. Yeah, that will stay with me forever.
It's very rare that a artist who's had a lifelong career is able to say goodbye on their own terms. Usually they either have a medical emergency where they can't perform anymore or they pass away unexpectedly. It's very rare for them to gracefully leave the stage of their own choice. So that's
Yeah.
very special.
The other one was we managed to get tickets again to see Dolly Parton's 50th anniversary at the Grand Ole Opry.
You're better at getting tickets than anyone I've ever met.
I think I'm highly motivated. So yeah, 3 o'clock in the morning, multiple devices, desperately trying to get these experiences. And the funny thing is, the tickets were just normal face value ticket prices. So I think they were under $50 each. And
Oh man.
on the day when I went to collect my tickets from the box office, I had a guy offer me $1,500 a seat for my tickets, and I went, that one was at the Opry House, which is out at
Okay.
Opryland, but they did a
Right.
whole week of Dolly shows in Nashville. It was a really big deal, as you can
Yeah.
imagine. And so we went to the Country
Yes.
Classics tribute to Dolly the night before at the Ryman. But I've seen some really cool shows at the Ryman. I actually saw Toto at the Ryman, which was pretty amazing. And I've seen Gladys
Wow.
Knight at the Ryman.
Wow. Two non-country
Right.
artists playing at the home church of
Exactly.
country
Yeah.
music. That's incredible. What is your favorite music venue that
The
you've ever
Ryman.
been to? You seem like you've
Yeah.
been Ryman. the best.
It's amazing.
When you're inside, can you feel the spirits and the
Yeah,
whole thing?
absolutely. So, as I touched on earlier, my nan, my grandmother, was a really big musical influence and probably like my favorite person in the whole universe. And she absolutely loved Patsy Cline. And so I remember the first time I went to the Ryman, we were just doing a tour. And I just sat in the beautiful carved pews and just looked down on the stage, and I could almost hear Patsy singing from that stage. And I just thought, what an incredible piece of history. It's still there and still living and breathing. And, Elvis got booed off the stage there. Like, it's just an amazing place. But the sound in that
Mhm.
building, I haven't heard anywhere else before it. There's something magic in those.
To that end, is there a venue in the US or anywhere that you most want to go to that you've never been to?
Madison Square Garden. Love to get there.
My problem is that that's my home theater. That's where I go to see concerts the most. So I have to watch myself from assuming that everyone feels the same way about it as the Church of Rock Music, where I truly think it is the cathedral of rock and roll music. I think Bono once called it that.
All right, thinking here in rock and roll's great cathedral that is Madison Square Garden.
But it feels to me like when rock bands and popular bands play the garden, they realize how special it is that they've made it. Selling out the garden is
Yeah.
a thing. But that's me. I'm a New Yorker. So, of course, I'm going to think that. But it's interesting to hear that you think so too. Please let me know when you're coming to a show at the garden and we will meet up and I'll
Oh,
show
yeah,
you
that would
around.
be cool.
Is there a band that you never saw who's no longer around that you most wish you had seen?
Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. So we were in Nashville and we were due to fly out the next day to go to a friend's wedding in Vegas. And the wedding, like I was a bridesmaid, the wedding preparation was she was a bit bridezillary. And we walked past the Bridgestone Arena in Nashville and I saw that Tom Petty was playing the next night. And I was like, oh, maybe we missed our flight. And I don't go to my friend's wedding. And we go see Tom Petty instead. And my husband, the voice of reason, was like, no, you'll never feel okay with yourself if you do that. Yeah, tour Australia. And I'm like, you're right. Tom Petty will tour Australia. It'll be fine. It wasn't fine. And the wedding was awful. And so that's the one that I think hurts the most. Definitely. Yeah.
The one that got
Yeah.
away.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I saw him twice and boy, he was
But
magic
don't
on
tell me
stage.
that.
Oh, sorry.
Terrible.
Yeah, he was terrible.
Wasn't worth it.
Terrible. No, I guess this gets to the core question of why I even have this podcast, which is what do you think it is about live music that keeps you flying to the States, uh, getting up at 3 a.m. on multiple devices? What is it about live music for you? And it's not, there's no one answer and there's no wrong answer, but what do you think it is about live music for you that keeps you coming back?
I think growing up in Australia and not having access, not having Madison Square Garden in my backyard, would just go and see band. It always felt unreachable. And so when I did get to go and see New Kids on the Block, I've arrived. This is the coolest thing ever. And I've never lost that feeling. So it doesn't matter who I'm going to see or where I'm going to see them, I have that feeling. And sometimes it depends on my connection to the music or the band. So, sometimes I'll go and see, like, we've been to the Grand Old Opry and I managed to request a song on the Grand Ole Opry. Like, who gets to do that? We were just sitting in the right place at the right time, and a couple of seats in front of us were empty. And the Gatlin brothers said, "We're going to play a game where you can pick a hymn, and we'll know it." And so I got to pick my nan's favorite hymn and hear them sing that to me on the Opry. And so it's a way of keeping like my nan alive. It's a way of keeping, I guess, really happy memories, really vibrant in my life. And so that's what music does. And I think there's something very special that happens when you gather a group of people who all love the performer on stage or just enjoy the performer on stage. There's something energetically that happens in that room that can't be replicated in a nightclub or playing music at home. It's not the same thing. And it's this amazing experience that's shared, and just energetically, that's really cool to be a part of.
I couldn't agree with you more. Have you ever discovered a band only by going to see a show? And usually, in my experience, they're opening acts that I had no idea who they were and then was blown away by and became a fan.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we go and do things like the Outlaw Music Festival or like Bourbon and Beyond Festival in Kentucky, there's always artists that we haven't seen or we kind of vaguely know about, and discover them when they're live on stage. But what I've found really interesting is that's how I've been discovering bands that people have loved forever as well. So we got to see Heart open for Def Leppard, and I didn't really like Heart when I was younger. I think I saw them at the tail end of, when they're um I can't even remember the name of the album, was released in the late 80s. It was a bit icky for me. I was the wrong age.
Oh, yeah, they got into like the very like big hair, shoulder
Exact.
pads.
And so I didn't have that
Mm,
appreciation for Heart. And then when we saw
yeah.
them play, I was like, oh my God, where have you been all my life? You guys are incredible. And I had the same with the Doobie Brothers of all things. They were playing at Bourbon and Beyond, I think last year or the year before when we were there. And the thing that I've never liked the Doobie Brothers, they're not my vibe. But the thing that I loved was seeing how much people loved them, and people were dancing, and it was all different ages. And it was just, there was something so cool about seeing that I found a new appreciation for the Doobie Brothers.
Doobie Brothers for me are kind of background music in the classic rock genre. They were never
Yeah.
my first
They're kind of
choice.
yacht rocky.
They're on the edge, right? They're a little more rock and roll than yacht rock, but they are too close to yacht rock for a hard
Yeah.
rocker like me's preference. But if I actually just go back and pick out some of their more upbeat songs in their
Yeah.
catalog, they're great.
Fun.
And they really are a talented band, good songwriters. Blackwater has a unique vibe that no other song in popular rock and roll music really ever captured. Really a bluegrassy kind of intro thing that kept up through the whole song. I've never seen the Doobie Brothers. I've always avoided that,
It's
but
fun.
maybe I have to give that because how much longer do I get to see these bands? I got to see them all while I
Exactly.
can.
Yeah. I think if I've learnt nothing else from not seeing Tom Petty, it's to just say yes to things. And I think that was a pivotal moment for me, because I realized you actually don't have the luxury of saying no to something because it may not come around again. So if you can say yes, you should say yes.
Our motto on this podcast is life is short, so get
Yeah.
those concert
I'm
tickets.
with you.
That's exactly it. You're not a professional musician and you're not in the music profession. What do you do for a living?
So interestingly enough, I work with early career professionals. So I've done that for a long time, supporting students who are going out into industry and learning their trade. But also, I run my own business. So I am an energy alchemist. So before I was talking about the energy of concerts, I work with people energetically to clear blockages and to create healing. So it sounds woo woo. It's really not. I'm very grounded. I'm very pragmatic. So I say I'm probably more woo hoo than woo woo. Um, and really, a big part of the work that I do is helping people to say yes to things, right? Because we say no
Right.
a lot. Yeah,
To get out of their own way
yeah,
and let
yeah,
good things happen.
exactly.
Do you have a business you'd like to promote, a
Yeah,
website?
so my website's under construction, but you can find me on Facebook under Soph Stafford Energy Alchemy.
I
And I
love it.
work with
I love it.
international people as well because it's all done virtually. So if you're in the US, you can still come and see me.
I hope that we get together in person sometime. I'd love to meet you and your husband. Let's stay in
Please.
touch on that. Is there anything I didn't ask that I should have?
You didn't ask me about Kiss. I know that Kiss is one of your first loves in music, and I have three really quick Kiss stories to tell you.
Make them long. I want to hear every one of them.
So, the first time after my husband and I first went out, he called me the next day. I was like, and he said, "Can I come over and visit you? We could watch some movies." And I said, "I don't have a TV." And he goes, "I'll bring a TV." And I'm like, okay. So he came over,
That's a pretty good motivation. That he was clearly motivated to come see you.
with his little TV
Very good.
and his VCR, and he bought a couple of movies to watch. And one of them was Detroit Rock City, which is, yeah, um, not my vibe. So I kind of, yeah, I really don't like Kiss. And so he couldn't have picked a worse movie. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I went to the American Music Awards and Gene Simmons and his wife walked past us and she actually dropped a lip gloss. And my friend picked it up and said, "Hey, excuse me, you've dropped your lip gloss." And she goes, "I don't want it now." And then as they were walking past, some other people said, "Hi, Jane." And he goes, "Hey, girls." And I was like, "I don't like you. I don't like your vibe." And then the last story is probably the most embarrassing story. We checked in at the Hard Rock Hotel in Vegas, and in every room they have a different theme. And they had this enormous, life size, giant Kiss poster in the room we checked into. And they were in their full makeup, and I just couldn't handle looking at them. They were freaking me out, and there was no way that we were going to have fun in that room with Kiss staring at me. And so I said to my husband, you got to call reception and tell them. And so he's like, okay. So he calls, very embarrassed, and he said, "Look, my wife really doesn't like Kiss. Can we do anything about this?" And they thought it was him trying to scam to get an upgraded room. And they said, "No, no, we're fully booked. There's nothing we can do." And he's like, "Can you just come and cover this picture?" And they went, "Okay, we'll call maintenance." So, an hour later, maintenance knocks on our door, and I was so embarrassed. I was hiding in the bathroom. And I just hear my husband say to this maintenance guy, "Yeah, you've just got to take it down or cover it or do something because she can't handle Kiss." And he's like, "But it's Kiss." And my husband's like, I know, I get it. But can you just help me out?" And the guy's like, "But it's Kiss." And he said, "Please, you've got to get this off the wall." So they had to go and get a special tool to remove this picture from the wall. And the guy was laughing so hard. And my husband's like, "She doesn't like clowns. She's scared of clowns." And he goes, "Oh, okay. All right, fine."
Good. That was
Yeah.
smart. It's funny. I have a weird Vegas Gene Simmons and
Okay.
Shannon story too. In 99, they played a show with the Who for a fake.com company that they didn't know was fake. It was these guys who wanted to put on a big rock and roll show in Vegas. And I was there on Halloween with friends. And there's a whole documentary about this, how the Who and Kiss and some other bands played this show. I don't know how they pulled this off. And I don't know all the details because I watched the documentary and I wasn't paying attention. But the next morning, I was on line at the airport at the gate to fly back to New York from Vegas. And in walk, and I don't understand how they weren't flying private, but in walks Gene and Shannon, and they get in line at the next line to fly to back to LA from Vegas. And Gene has a giant hat on, and he's tall. He's taller than I am, and he's wearing cowboy boots, and he's walking around like a shark. Like he didn't want to stay still because he was worried someone might come up to him. So she just sat in line and he walked around. And when he came back and stood in line, he looked at me and then looked at her and said, "That guy wants is eyeing you. He's trying to hit on you." And I just rolled my eyes. And she said, like, "Oh, Gene." She was just fed up with him, or just used to that. I don't even know what it was.
Yeah.
But he's just a jerk. And if he knew what a big fan of I wasn't there to see that show, by the way. I was just in Vegas with friends celebrating Halloween and having fun. If he knew what a big fan I was of his up to that point and what not a big fan I was after that minute, I know he doesn't care or wouldn't have cared, but oh, if he had known what a massive, massive fan I was of his. So that is my heartbreaking Gene Simmons story. And on that, I will say thank you so much, so for your time today. I can't wait to see what shows you come to. You've clearly gone to more arenas in America than I have. You're setting a good model for me. We should try and get you
Oh,
American
I'm
citizenship for all
trying.
the
I'm
times you've been
trying.
here.
We're in the green card
Yeah.
lotto.
Oh, are you really?
It's wish me
Oh,
luck.
that's great. Would you move here if you got
Yeah,
a
in a
green card?
heartbeat. Yeah.
Oh, all right. Where would you move to?
Pretty much anywhere that would have us, I think. But Nashville would be amazing. LA would be amazing. New York would be amazing. We love Chicago. Yeah, we're not picky. Yeah.
All right. We'll talk more, but let's stay in touch. Thank you so much for your time today. It was great getting
Thanks a
to know you a
lot.
little. So that's it for today's conversation. Thank you for joining us. We'll be back next Tuesday. And if you like what you heard today, we'd appreciate it if you would like and subscribe or follow to make sure you get notified about each new episode. And please tell your friends. Additionally, we want to know what you think. Please leave us a comment and we'll try to respond to every one of them. The Rock and Roll Show podcast is a World Highway Media production. I'm your host, Alex Gadd. And until next time, remember that life is short, so get those concerts.